If you hate the small talks and likes to talk about something meaningful, here you go. I prepared for you 4 books recommendation that would make you incredibly interesting attendant of any discussion, and it's heavy lift. Physically and mentally, intellectually, but it's definitely going to convert your time into the educational capital that you can share with other people and actually build your relationships, not on something very primitive and trivial topics, but rather showing your interest into some topics that you are deeply into. And by doing this, you would build way more deeper connections to some people. At least that's the approach I have. All the connections I prefer quality over quantity, and I really like to have the people with whom I can go deeply into some philosophical or some cultural discussions, because through that I also get a lot of insights. And first step for me usually it's to have my insights from the literature that is available there. 4 books, it's heavy lift, I know. I'm prioritizing right now one of the books that I'm so much into. It's Christmas time for me, and I'm reading this book, Distinction, wrote by Pierre Bourdieu. I hope I pronounced that correctly, and it's about the distinguish between the different classes and how our tastes, our social and educational capital is built. It's deeply interesting for me to understand how can I enhance my cultural background or my cultural capital into something that actually can serve me as an investment of my time right now into something that I convert into good conversation in the future. I really have good thoughts. I go in actively and underlining all the interesting thoughts, and definitely to make the knowledge stick with me, I started discussing it with my friends, with my family members, because through that I also not only consume the content, I process it and I try to share already my opinion. And that's what I think about any social conversation. If you are attending any social events, networking events, I rather prefer having some deep conversation on some interesting topics that combine people or that connect people together. For example, art for me is a very universal topic. So that's why I think this book would help you a lot to understand how you can turn your educational capital, your cultural capital into something that helps you to build meaningful connections. And talking about the art, I can also suggest you the book that is in German, but you can easily find it in English or any other languages that you speak. It's called History of Art, wrote by Bombrich, Austrian professor, if I'm not mistaken, who's being very much into the history of art and actually combines all the historical timelines into one book that gives you very fruitful baseline to understand how to look at art and where you tend to have more interest on, and maybe later to go into some specific century or some specific genre or some specific period of art. But that's ultimately the starting mile for anyone who wants to get deeper into the art. And for me, definitely, after reading this book, I read it twice already, the traveling became such an inspiring event, because now whenever I go to some big cities like Rome or Milan or I don't know, Munich or any other big cities like London, I cannot forget what I read here, and I start seeing some objects already with a bit of the background knowledge, how to look at the things, what is the requirements for that period, or maybe just grasp of what was the competitor, for example, at that time. By doing this, art becomes not something that I have to do because the teacher brought us into the museum as the students group, but it rather gives me a holistic view on the world and how the culture and historical and social moments all combine together. And by having this additional lens to look at art makes my travels and my discussions quite often very fruitful, and I can say that it's already heavy to keep it in my hand. It feels like a workout, but even harder to go through that. But once you've done this book, I'm pretty sure you would never regret it, and you would be that person that would always have something to say, interesting and creative, and your own perspective very authentic to you after reading this book and participating in any conversation on the high society level. Moving on to another book that can also help you to build your image of a smart, very intellectual person. It's of course the book from Ray Dalio. I'm pretty sure you also heard about that, Why Nations Succeed and Fail. It's also a great anatomy of historical moments and analysis to the templates where Ray Dalio, the author of this book, analyzes how actually world of economics moves through some templates, and you start seeing this through his careful explanations. I reference to this book quite often recently over the discussion at my workplace with my friends, and I'm always see how people are amazed about the knowledge I get from the book. So they are ultimately interested and motivated to read one. So that's why I actually wanted to share that with you. I know that it's also heavy lift. All of the books, as you see, they are very much written as journalistic way of writing. It's more like a long paperwork rather than some non-fiction like self-help book. But believe me, if you would dedicate some time and if you are genuinely interested in this topic, I'm pretty sure you would get it through, and you would be in this rhythm if you read it constantly, for example, 10 pages a day for another month. You would get a lot of knowledge. And as I said, if you want to convert this knowledge from just reading into the knowledge capital that you carry in your head, I recommend you always to discuss what you read with your close friends or your family members or your or people you meet over the next networking event, because by doing this you process information and you make it stick in your head, so next time you are easily to access this knowledge in your head and put it into the conversation and became that incredible person that no one can forget from the networking event. Because the one thing that I don't like about networking event is check in on social status when everyone asks you where you work, where you're from, what's your age, and any other details. That seems so boring to me, and I would prefer building fewer but more meaningful connections through the interesting and engaging conversation rather than just doing the social check. And the last in my list, also well known, Sapiens. I know that there are plenty of books written by this author, Yuval Harrari, but this one, I think that's the main work that I personally prefer to read. I think it's very essential and gives the good holistic view again on the timelines of the development. In general, you see that I'm very much into culture, economics and history. That's genuinely my biggest points of interest. And to be honest, I still read a lot of classical books. I really like Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. That's my ultimately favorite, as well as Theodor Dreiser. I love his literature as well, but it's more like my bedtime stories. But whenever I sit on my couch, especially over the winter time when I have more time to sit with my cat at home, I really like to go into something meaningful that can convert my time into something that I can use later on. It's not just reading to be entertained, it's honestly reading to be educated. And when I finished my master, I thought, never again, I won't go to this educational spine. But you know, after a few years, I realized that I really have this deep need to get to inquire more knowledge. And that's why I actually like to read and like to share with you everything I know about how to be successful at work, how to invest your time and money into something meaningful that gives you entertaining at the moment, but also gives you better chances to see more opportunities in this life. I hope that you like this video, and let me know which book you would prefer to read, if any, and let us see each other in my next videos. Take care and see you very soon. Bye bye.